Night has a way of softening the difference between fast and merely noisy. But some shapes stay sharp, even in the half-light of street lamps and wet pavement. They do not need a forest of chrome or a V12 to make their point. Sometimes all it takes is one impossible curve of metal and a hood that never seems to end. This is the story of the Jaguar E Type, the car that stepped out at the 1961 Geneva Motor Show and made the rest of the sports car world look dated. A Le Mans-bred machine dressed as a road car, sold at a price that made Ferrari and Aston Martin deeply uncomfortable. Tonight, in the Car Story Vault, we open the file marked E-Type. We will follow this car from the nighttime straights of Le Mans to a lakeside lawn in Geneva, through the shifting tastes of the 1960s, and into the bright lights of modern auction tents. And we will ask why, after all these years, one low British coupe can still stop people in their tracks in a way numbers alone never can. So settle in, let the sound of distant traffic fade. Imagine a low idle echoing off a garage wall and a silver shape waiting under the strip lights, a car that refuses to disappear into the dark. The story of the E-Type does not start with a brochure. It starts with a racing car and a set of French night skies. In the mid-1950s, Jaguar's D-Type dominates endurance racing. It wins the 24 Hours of Le Mans 3 times in a row between 1955 and 1957, building a reputation for speed, durability, and clever aerodynamics. Under its skin, the D-Type uses ideas more at home in aircraft than in traditional road cars. A semi-monocoque tub for the driver and rear end, with a separate front structure for the engine and suspension. When Jaguar begins to think about its next road-going sports car, it does not start from scratch. It takes that racing knowledge and starts to bend it toward the street. Prototypes appear in the shadows. First E1A, a small experimental roadster, never shown to the public. Then E2A, a racing testbed, half competition car, half dress rehearsal for something bigger. Meanwhile, company boss Sir William Lyons is watching the market. Ferrari, Aston Martin, Maserati, beautiful, fast, and priced like art. Lyons' idea is simple and audacious. Build a car with racing DNA that an ambitious professional, not just a millionaire, could dream of owning. March 15, 1961. Parc des Eaux Vives, beside Lake Geneva. On the grass stands a low gray coupe with the registration 9600 HP, a hand-built prototype of Jaguar's new E-Type, waiting to meet the world's press. It almost does not make it. PR man Bob Berry has been using 9600 HP for press drives in the UK. When the time comes, there is no trailer, no truck, just a simple instruction: drive the car to Geneva and be there in time. Berry sprints across Europe almost non-stop, through rain and night, catching a ferry by minutes, arriving at the park in Geneva just about 20 minutes before the first journalists are due. The car is still hot when the cameras start clicking. Very quickly it becomes clear that one E-Type is not enough. The demand for drives is insane. Lyons picks up the phone to Coventry and tells test driver Norman Dewis to do the unthinkable, drop everything and drive the E-Type to Geneva, now. Dewis leaves that evening in a British registered open E-Type, Roadster 77 RW. He battles rain, fog, and fatigue, covers roughly 600 miles overnight at an average speed that would still raise eyebrows today, and reaches Geneva just in time to hand the keys to waiting journalists. Sometime during that show, according to legend, Enzo Ferrari looks at the E-Type and calls it the most beautiful car in the world. Whether the exact words were spoken or not, the verdict from the room is clear. A new icon has just stepped into the light. The E-Type is not just pretty. It is a set of proportions turned up to 11. The hood is impossibly long, stretching ahead like a runway. The cabin is pushed back, almost over the rear axle, and the tail is short and neatly cut off. From the front, the early Series 1 cars have glass-covered headlamps set into elegant recesses, framing a small oval opening in the nose. Designer Malcolm Sayer is not a stylist in the traditional sense. He is an aerodynamicist with an aircraft background. He uses mathematics and an eye for airflow to draw the E-Type's curves. The result is a body that is both sculpture and tool, sleek, low, and slippery enough to make high speeds feel almost effortless for the time. Inside, the car speaks with a different accent: a wood-rimmed 3-spoke steering wheel, a row of round dials marching across the dash, toggle switches and levers for lights, fuel pumps and heaters. It is less a lounge and more a cockpit, a place to work, not to be chauffeured. Across the decade, other cars will gain more chrome, more gadgets, and more square edges. The E-Type, by contrast, keeps looking like something drawn with one continuous line and then somehow built in steel. When the E-Type launches, what we now call Series 1 comes in two basic forms: a two-seat fixed-head coupe and an open two-seater roadster. Under that long bonnet sits Jaguar's XK Straight 6, 3.8 liters at first, later 4.2, an engine whose roots go back to the late 1940s, but which still feels entirely up to date in 1961. The numbers are startling for the era. Around 265 horsepower, more than 350 Newton-meters of torque, and a claimed top speed of about 240 kilometers per hour, putting the E-Type in the same performance postcode as contemporary Ferraris for a fraction of the price. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour takes somewhere in the region of 7 seconds, depending on whose stopwatch you trust. But the hardware is more interesting than the headline. The E-Type uses independent suspension on all four wheels at a time when many rivals still make do with live rear axles. At the back, the brakes are mounted inboard next to the differential, reducing unsprung weight, a race-inspired solution hidden under a production car. The structure is a mix of a front subframe carrying engine and front suspension, bolted to a stressed monocoque tub. In 1964, the engine grows to 4.2 liters. Power on paper barely changes, but torque swells, drivability improves, seats and brakes are upgraded, and the car becomes easier to use every day. 2 years later, a 2+2 version with a longer wheelbase arrives, adding a pair of small rear seats and opening the E-Type up to owners who need to carry more than one passenger, or at least the family dog. Time, law, and America come knocking. By the late 1960s, emissions rules and safety regulations, particularly in the United States, are reshaping sports cars. The Series 2 E-Type, introduced around 1968, reflects that reality. The headlamps lose their glass covers, bumpers grow, and the rear lights are larger and mounted higher. Cooling, brakes, and interior details are revised in the name of reliability and comfort, especially for American owners who expect their fast car to start every morning and not overheat in traffic. In 1971, Jaguar takes a bigger step with Series 3. The short wheelbase two-seat coupe disappears, leaving only the Roadster and the 2+2, both on the longer wheelbase. The E-Type shifts its center of gravity from sharp sports car toward Grand Tour. The biggest change sits between the front wheels, a new 5.3-liter V12. With around 272 horsepower and a broad wave of torque, the V12 gives the Series 3 strong, effortless acceleration and a different personality, smoother, more refined, more relaxed at high cruising speeds. Power steering becomes standard, brakes improve again, and automatic gearboxes become common, especially in the US. Purists sometimes see the Series 3 as the heavy one, the moment the E-Type stopped being a racer in disguise and turned into a low, beautiful cruiser. But for many owners, it is the most usable E-Type of all, the one you can actually drive across a continent without wondering whether your spine or your cooling system will give up first. Production ends in 1974, squeezed by regulations, costs, and changing tastes. The XJS arrives as its replacement, a very different shape for a new decade, but the idea of a long bonnet Jaguar GT never quite leaves. On paper, an E-Type is just numbers. On a road, it is posture, sound, and perspective. You sit low, legs stretched out in front, hands wrapped around thin wood. Through the windscreen, the bonnet runs away from you like a silver runway, with a central bulge as a reminder of the straight six underneath. The XK engine has a voice. At idle, it murmurs. At low revs, it pulls with a lazy, almost elastic strength. And as you climb higher, it hardens into a mechanical snarl. There is no insulation from the process. You hear the carbs, feel the gearbox, sense the driveline. For a car from 1961, the independent suspension and disc brakes can feel surprisingly modern, but they still demand respect. This is a light, powerful machine with 1960s tires and 1960s safety systems. Step into a V12 Series 3 and the message changes. The soundtrack gets smoother, the torque comes in earlier, and the whole car feels more relaxed, particularly at motorway speeds. What began as a barely domesticated racing animal has by the early 1970s become a long-legged GT, still fast, still charismatic, but now more interested in crossing countries than setting lap times. Either way, driving an E-Type is less about chasing absolute performance and more about inhabiting a moment in time, a fast road, an empty horizon, and that sense that the car underneath you comes from an era when beauty and speed were allowed to be completely unapologetic. Most cars grow old. A few grow into roles they were never designed for. The E-Type becomes a yardstick, a reference point in almost every most beautiful car list ever compiled. As decades pass, good cars are cherished, rough ones are restored, and the market begins to separate the exceptional from the merely decent. Auction catalogs tell the story in numbers. Early Series 1 3.8-liter roadsters and coupes, especially the very first cars, and those with known history, climb steadily in value. In 2023, a 1961 Series 1 3.8 Roadster, the fourth right-hand drive roadster built and the first E-Type delivered to a customer, sets a new world record for a production E-Type, selling for £911,250. Around the car, an ecosystem grows. Specialists like Eagle in the UK take original shells and transform them into Restomods, modern brakes, suspension and powertrains hidden under that unmistakable silhouette. Jaguar itself marks the E-Type's 60th anniversary with special 60 collection cars and celebrations of 9600 HP and 77 RW, the two machines that carried the brand into Geneva in March 1961. Today, an E-Type can be many things at once. A Concours Queen judged down to the millimeter, a lightly patinated survivor that still does what it was built to do, or a thoroughly re-engineered Restomod that just happens to look like 1961 on the outside. So what do we do with the Jaguar E-Type now? Is it just a beautiful fossil preserved in garages and auction halls? Or proof that, once in a while, engineering, aerodynamics, and timing line up so perfectly that a car can step out of its own decade and stay there untouched in our heads? Stand next to one after rain. The car is so low the droplets on the bonnet look almost level with your knees. Streetlights break across the curves, the reflections stretching and bending as if the metal were still liquid. Inside, it is not silent. There is the smell of fuel, leather, and old wiring, the click of switches that feel like small pieces of machinery, not plastic suggestions. Turn the key and you wake a straight 6 or a V12 that has nothing to do with modern start-stop systems. It coughs, catches, and settles into a living idol. Maybe that is why the E-Type still matters. It is not just a picture on a calendar or a name in a coffee table book. It is a reminder that in 1961, a company from Coventry drove a hand-built prototype across Europe, rolled it onto a lawn in Geneva, and made a room full of people rethink what a sports car could be. And somewhere, tonight, in a quiet garage, or leaving a cars and coffee meet, an E-Type is doing the same thing it did back then. Firing, idling, pulling out into the dark, and proving that some shapes were never meant to disappear. If you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to the Car Story Vault for more slow cinematic journeys through automotive history.